Let's get some reaction and some real insight here from Simon Marks, of course, LBC's Washington correspondent. I mean, jaws to the floor, Simon Marks.
Absolutely jaw-dropping, Ranvir Singh. I mean, this is a moment in history. Let's be very clear about what we have just witnessed. This is the moment in which an American president has incinerated any commitment that the United States has to the international system, rules-based system of law and order. That appearance by President Trump will be causing nightmares at number 10 and among European leaders all over the continent. They were hoping that he was going to give them some kind of an off-ramp. And indeed, if you listened, there was a real contrast between what President Trump said and what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, because the Secretary of State kept insisting Maduro was the illegitimate president of Venezuela. The Europeans agreed with that. This was simply an effort to bring a fugitive to justice, which might have created a sort of a narrow basis on which to claim that this was a legal effort by the United States to apprehend a fugitive, and that was it. It was not an attack. It was not a declaration of war on another sovereign nation. But President Trump completely undercut that. In fact, he described what had taken place over the last few hours in Venezuela as one of the most precise attacks on sovereignty that has ever been carried out. So he is basically copping to the notion that this was an egregious violation of international law. The notion that the United States is now going to run Venezuela was never adequately fleshed out by the president. He says that they're about to designate some appointees, presumably to go to Venezuela. He says he's not afraid of putting boots on the ground in Venezuela, but any American serviceman or woman sent onto Venezuelan soil will be at tremendous risk, given the fact that the entire political establishment of Nicolas Maduro has been deeply hostile to the United States, dating all the way back to the Chavez era. He suggested that Marco Rubio had had a telephone conversation with the new Venezuelan president, the Delcy Rodriguez, Nicolas Maduro's vice president, who he says has now been sworn in as president. And in Donald Trump's telling, she basically pledged fealty to the United States and said, we'll do whatever you tell us to do. I mean, I think that is highly unlikely given the nature of the political movement that she is inheriting from President Maduro. And he came back time and again. I mean, as a first order of business, anytime he was asked a question about who's going to run Venezuela, he came back time and again to the role that he wants American oil behemoths to play in getting their hands on Venezuelan crude. So there's not even an effort to disguise that this is a war on oil. I think it's a massive millstone around his own neck. We've already seen numerous American occupations in other parts of the world go badly wrong. He sort of dismissed that question about why running a Latin America country should be aligned with America first, saying, well, we want to have friendly relations with our neighbors and we want to make money out of their oil industry. But there will be huge questions among Trump's own supporters about what kind of a millstone he's hung around his own neck. But it's also a massive millstone in terms of his relationship with the Prime Minister and with European leaders. Our Prime Minister has bent over backwards to avoid confrontation with Donald Trump on every single issue over the last 11 months. How can you avoid confrontation with him on this when earlier today you said that the United Kingdom is absolutely committed to international law and the rules-based system that governs international relations, and Donald Trump, on behalf of the American people, has just eviscerated America's commitment to that rules-based system? I think they must be having a nightmarish evening ahead at number 10.
Simon Marks, I've just finished watching Stranger Things, and I have to say, it feels to me like we are truly in the upside down.
The upside down?
We are in the upside down. It is totally chilling to hear at the very end almost of that press conference a question about Cuba already And I think it was Marco Rubio said, Cuba is incompetent. Their economy is in collapse. And in fact, Venezuela was basically colonized by Cuba, indicating potentially that this isn't the end of what they want to do in their neighbouring countries. This is a marker in the sand, a very, very strong, stunning, a completely shocking, jaw-dropping moment in world history where I think the axis has turned, hasn't it? We are now truly in new territory. We always thought it was coming, but now we're here.
Absolutely uncharted waters. I think they sounded the death knell for the communist regime in Cuba there tonight, because they say they're not going to allow any oil to reach Cuban shores from Venezuela. And if you're running Venezuela, presumably, in some fashion, you would have the capacity to stop that from happening. He says he's keeping the armada, as he calls it, present off the shores of Venezuela, presumably to carry on interdicting Venezuelan sanctioned oil tankers. Without Venezuelan oil, Cuba is done. The only thing keeping the lights on, keeping the power running in Cuban factories is Venezuelan oil. And that's going to dry up in very short order. And that is going to pose real challenges politically and in humanitarian terms for the government and the people of Cuba. And I think it's going to foment the possibility of an uprising on the island that lies 90 miles off America's shores. But he went further than simply threatening Cuba. He also absolutely threatened the government of Colombia, indicating that they may well be next. He vigorously and offered a full-throated assertion that what he's doing is implementing the Monroe Doctrine, or as he now calls it, the Donroe Doctrine, because he's adding his own name to it. I mean, it wasn't only the Kennedy Center that he wanted to name. He now wants to take the Monroe Doctrine and have that named after himself. And that is the 1823 doctrine promulgated by President James Monroe that says Latin America is uniquely America's sphere of influence.
Right,
and he articulated that vigorously throughout that press conference.
And Simon, here, of course, in European land, there is a war ongoing with Ukraine and Russia. And the message it gives out to Putin is take what you want by force if necessary.
Absolutely, and it also sends exactly the same message to President Xi Jinping in China with regards to Taiwan. If you are Xi Jinping tonight or Vladimir Putin tonight, you cannot believe your luck. The American president has basically set fire to the international rules-based system by which we have lived since the end of 1945 and the Second World War. He says he will take whatever he wants. He's going to grab Venezuela. I think, by the way, the Danes should be increasingly worried about the prospect of an armada heading in the direction of Greenland from the United States before long. And in what position will the United States be to defend Ukrainian territory and sovereignty against Vladimir Putin, or Taiwan against the territorial aspirations of President Xi Jinping, who we already know has just completed a series of military exercises that completely encircled the island and was essentially a rehearsal for what we all think will be possibly in 2027. Maybe he'll do it sooner than that, an effort by President Xi to bring Taiwan back under the control of the Chinese mainland. This is about, the strong men on the world stage carving the world up for themselves, and Donald Trump laying claim to being one of those strong men. That's what this is all about, coupled, of course, with his intent to take control of the largest known oil reserves on the planet, the oil reserves and the oil industry of Venezuela, based on the false premise that in 1976 a former Venezuelan government, quote unquote, stole American oil, and no other American president has done anything to get it back. It's a staggering place for us to be tonight.
We run out of superlatives at this point, don't we? But Simon Marks, does this truly mean the end of the special relationship between the UK and America, which has been difficult and very, very strained for some time? But what on earth is Sir Keir Starmer going to do?
I have no idea, Ranvir. I mean, I've been saying for weeks on LBC that I thought it was absolutely inevitable that the moment would come when the Prime Minister was not going to be able to maintain a situation in which he tried to head off constantly confrontation with the American president. We've seen it again and again on every issue, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's the defamation lawsuit against the BBC, never mind the fact that the United Kingdom has turned a blind eye to the appalling civil rights abuses that are taking place as Donald Trump's masked and thuggish agents take to the streets of American cities and round people up to be part of his mass deportation more. Never mind all of that. Now we are at a crossroads on an issue that is much larger than Venezuela.
Yeah.
It is an issue that relates to whether the world is going to be governed in accordance with international law or not. Donald Trump has engaged, by his own admission tonight, in a flagrant breach of international law, and there's going to be no way for the Prime Minister or any other European leader to square this circle. There's no way of turning a blind eye to what the American president is indicating could become a full-scale occupation of Venezuela, or at the very least is going to become a situation in which some sort of American kind of imperial government is placed in administration of Venezuela for an unknown period of time, with, you know, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth becoming sort of princelings overseeing the government of Venezuela. I mean, you can't not take a position on that, and I think they must be desperately trying to figure out what direction they are going to go here.
Yeah.
And we should just make the point, Ranvir, we're into the third day of the year that is going to see America's 250th birthday being celebrated. The King, Queen Camilla, the Prince of Wales, the Princess of Wales, they're all supposed to be coming to the United States in the next 6 months. How on earth is that going to work out moving forwards?
Simon Marks, exquisitely put, our LBC's Washington correspondent. It is now 10 to 6.